Today we're going to be working on this project featuring a flower cart. It's a lot of fun to customize and not overly complicated. You'll want to grab a waterproof pen, a pencil, watercolor paper, and of course your watercolor paints. If you want to get straight into the drawing, timestamps are below. In the meantime, I'm just going to spend a minute or two talking about the process I take when I'm coming up with a little scene like this. What I like to do is use a page or two of my sketchbook just to get all of my thoughts and ideas out in the open. Going into this, I knew that I wanted a flower cart to be the main attraction, but that was basically all I had planned. So you can see where I played around with different ideas for the cart. This one here has a wheel and handles, but then I started thinking, I'm not sure if you'd want the handles on this side or not. Do you push down, lifting the other end up when you push? Or is it more like a wheelbarrow, where you lift from the opposite side from the wheel? I've never operated a flower cart, so I don't know. I do know that you would not want to be stuck with this one. The handles indicate that it's movable, yet I drew no wheels, so I guess after a long day in the sun, you're stuck dragging this guy home. Luckily, on the second page, most of the bad ideas had been purged and I started to narrow things down. I explored the idea of a ladder shelf for a bit, and then I started moving into bench designs. And ultimately, what I decided on was these 5 items. You'll see those in the upper corner there. And I really think these will give us a good variety of shapes and sizes to work with. This next page was where all the elements came together for the first time. And I was happy with the composition, placing the focal kind of slightly off-centered like that. But if you watched my urban sketching video, then you know that I am not great at proportions. Did anyone notice the bench seems to be built for an American Girl doll? Yeah, it's a little on the small side. So that revelation led to the final drawing, the one that we'll be using as a reference for today's video. I was definitely more careful when it came to sizing, and I thought it would help to add some light grid markings just to keep things somewhat proportionate. My sketchbook is a 5" by 8", so I kept it simple, making each box right around 1 square inch. And then you'll notice here on my watercolor paper, I have small marks off to the sides. If I had drawn these out entirely, the result would also be 5 squares up and 8 squares across. Okay, let's get into the drawing. So I'm going to start with a pencil for the major outlines. I really do prefer to jump straight in with pen with this style, but the way I'm set up to film, I have to stay back farther out of the way of the camera, and even with my glasses, I can't see what I'm doing as well as I can when I'm close up. So let's get this part done quickly and we'll get on to the fun part. I'm taking note of where these items fall within the grid. Doesn't need to be exact, but somewhat close so I don't wind up with another awkwardly small bench like the practice drawing. And the great thing about this flower cart is just how many different variations you can make. You can choose to include a wheel and handles, some additional shelves or signage, and I'm sure you can even come up with a variety of ideas for the top. Like, do you want a canopy or maybe an umbrella? And I'm just going to stick basically to the practice one. I might not go with all the details that I did in the previous one, but I think for the most part, I'll kind of go with a similar design. I love these huge oversized potted plants in the cement containers. My bench here is looking a bit crooked, but it's not really bad enough to break out the eraser, so I'm just going to keep going. I would say the lamppost might be the most challenging item to draw due to those long vertical lines. It's like I want it to be imperfect and slightly shaky, but not so much that it looks tilted or leaning over. It can be tough to strike that balance. And with items found in nature, you'll find that it comes easily. But with the man-made items like this, not so much. And now I'm running over my existing lines with a Micron Fine liner, size 005. This is the smallest tip size, but just use whatever pen you have handy. One cool thing about going over the pencil with pen is that it's a second opportunity to add some interest to your lines. Let your hand wiggle and shake. Don't try for perfection. And now that we've gotten rid of the pencil lines, we can bring in some additional details into the drawing, a touch of texture and a little hint of shadow here and there. And now's a good time to start thinking about what you want your pots to look like. What type of plants do you want to see in your flower stand? I'm not going to let myself get caught up in all the small details at this point because we will be coming back in after we paint and we'll be adding those final little bits at that time. I'm not sure if this loose, sort of playful drawing style has a name or not, but I feel like it's in the same realm as urban sketching. I mean, obviously, I'm not outside right now smelling the fresh flowers and soaking up the atmosphere of the park, but it's, I don't know, not really in the same category, but the line style, I would say, is really fast and imperfect, and the approach does feel somewhat similar. You know what I mean? I absolutely love drawing plants with this style. Just sort of letting the leaves wiggle and squiggle along. It's just so much fun. And let's add a little something to hold our bench together there. And onto the stand. I think I want this bottom part to look kind of like bricks almost. Like the previous drawing, I'm going to add a sign up here, an open sign, letting everyone know we're ready for business. The bottom of the canopy looks a bit boring, so let's just add maybe a couple extra lines there. And now onto the fun part, the pots and the plants. This is definitely my favorite part. And I love adding little designs on the pots too. If you want to throw some stars or dots or hearts, or even just some color blocking on the pots can be fun too. And for this large one down at the bottom, I'm trying to go for like one of those little succulent bowls. You know, the ones that have multiple succulents in one dish. And then how about a nice hanging plant here? I'm trying to leave myself some space along the top there so that I can just come in with the leaves and drape them over the top. Small circles will help make this look more like a chain. I'm going to add a couple tulips to this long vase here. I was also thinking it would be cute to have like a box of seed packets on the counter. So you just sort of see the top of the packet sticking out and then a label that says seeds. That could be a really cute option. Because I didn't leave myself a whole lot of room under this hanging plant, these are going to be microgreens. They don't have to stick up very far, so that will work just perfect. Placing some birds in flight in the sky. And you know the little bird that looks like an upside down V? I know it's just the wings when they're kind of pointing downward, but for some reason, whenever I draw that specific type of bird, I always picture him actually flying upside down in the sky, like doing a little silly nosedive upside down. So that always makes me laugh when I draw those. I've wet my paper down with my misting bottle, and I'm coming in now with a wash of cerulean blue. This is usually my go-to color for skies, but if anyone wants to let me know in the comments your go-to sky colors, I'd love to hear them. While I do really like this blue, I wouldn't mind having another option for those really bright days where you just have like a few puffy clouds in the sky. For whatever reason, I just always find myself reaching for cerulean time and time again. I'm using hooker's green as well as undersea green for my grass and my bushes. And if I were going with something more true to reality, I'd probably do some color mixing, but since the style here is more whimsical and not at all realistic, I'm happy with these bright, clean colors. And besides, the colors will do some blending of their own once they're on the paper. And I used cadmium red and cadmium yellow for the sunshade. And for the base of the flower stand and the wood of the sign and the bench, I'm using burnt umber and burnt sienna. You'll notice that I'm using a really good sized brush, even on the smaller areas, and this just helps keep it really loose. And when the colors touch, I welcome the bleeds. Do you notice over there on the left where the sign is just flowing into the green bush? That's the good stuff right there. I love it. And you see some more of that where the yellow is bleeding into the sky. For a few of these planters, I'm using gray titanium, so it'll resemble concrete. And the lamppost is Bloodstone Genuine. In a few minutes, I'll also be using this paint color for a touch of shading throughout the picture. And I've likely mentioned this in other videos, but Bloodstone is such a cool alternative to black. It's not quite as dark and harsh as a color like lamp black. Plus, it's a granulating watercolor, so it brings a whole nother level of texture that most dark paints don't. And I use this color a lot. And for the green in the plants, I'm back to using the hooker's green and undersea, plus a little dab of turquoise here and there. And most often, perline green is my favorite color to add to pretty much anything that has to do with nature. It's what I use for depth and shadows. And even though it sounds a little bit funny, I think it just kind of adds like a layer of sophistication to a landscape. That and Payne's Gray. While I love perline, it feels too serious for a project like this one. I don't know, is it just me? Are perline green and Payne's Gray sort of dining on caviar, while these colors that we're using today are just out throwing a pizza party? I don't know. Do you have any colors that you see as ultra sophisticated? So at this point, I've pretty much covered the entire paper, so I'm just coming in with a second layer, just darkening up some spots and bringing a little more color here and there. And I'm throwing some darker shades into these cracks. Some more Bloodstone Genuine underneath here. And now I'm going to go ahead and switch to a smaller brush size. I think it's just going to be a little bit easier to get some details in there. And again, I'm really not worrying about too much in the way of detail. Nothing's going to be super intricate or anything. But because I don't intend to cover everything that I just painted, the smaller size just works well. So you can still see some of the lighter values underneath. The canopy's looking a little bit too clean for me, so I'm just going to scruff it up a little bit. Okay, I think for the most part we are done with the painting part. So I'm back to the fine liner now, just darkening and enhancing some of the previous lines. And if you're not really sure what you want to work on at this stage, I've found that a good rule of thumb is to focus on the shadows. So if my sun was shining down from the same corner as my street light, then I would want my darkest values to be at the bottom and the left of my objects. So I'll just work on those areas, leaving the tops and the right sides pretty much just how they are right now. And by the way, why is my street light aglow at this time of the day? Shouldn't it be on some sort of sensor? I don't know. And I'm just going to breeze through this part pretty quickly here. And this would be a great opportunity to add some hatching or some stippling to your art. My lines at this point are just kind of doing whatever they want. But I suppose technically I have used some hatching and stippling. And sorry if my words are kind of all over the place in this video. I do like to have a little more structure and a plan in most of my videos, but from time to time I will just give it a go and wing it. And clearly this is a wing it type of video. I definitely watch some YouTubers who are so great at just talking to the camera and they just keep the conversation flowing. But unfortunately, I just don't really have that in me. So it's a little bit more of a struggle for me. And I think it'll get better with time. I really do. There's just something awkward about the one-sided conversation. Asking those questions that you know no one's going to answer, but you just keep on talking anyways. All right, I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up as far as the pen part goes. I'm just going to give the whole picture a little splash of paint and we're going to see how it looks. Well, the droplets were larger than I'd hoped for, so things got a bit crazy, but that's okay. I think I'm also going to add some more color. The watercolor has definitely faded more than I had hoped, so I will return in just a moment once I've taken it up a notch. And here we are. I like that much better. I pretty much just focused on the cadmium red and yellow, brought some brightness to the picture, and then I also noticed that I had forgotten to add armrests to my bench. So I went ahead and did that, and I'm actually really happy with the outcome. Well, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.